Hey, movie fans, it's Cinematic Crandall. I'm here with my good buddy Steve Kasan, who you may know from some of our armchair director commentaries. And a couple days ago, we were lucky enough to see an advanced screening of Terminator Dark Fate at TIFF with director Tim Miller in attendance. And Steve, you're an Arnold Schwarzenegger super fan. So
Absolutely.
we're going to get into this for Terminator Dark Fate. Finally, James Cameron is back as producer of a Terminator movie. So this is going to be a spoiler talk. Steve, what did you think of this one?
Um, well, also not only a Arnold Schwarzenegger fan, but also a big fan of Terminator series. Like I even gave Genesis a chance. I even like some parts of Genesis as well.
Yep.
There's some things in there. I will a strong supporter of T3. I really like. I think that movie does one thing where the series should have gone and should have ended
Yep.
in Salvation, and that T3 is the bridge film. T3 takes you to the future war,
Yeah.
and in the future, that's where really good with Salvation, but nobody dug that as much. And there are some things in that too.
Yeah.
So think of Dark Fate. The main thing was bringing back James Cameron, or his involvement back into it,
Yeah.
and also Linda Hamilton.
Of
And
course.
I'm guessing when you watching us discuss the spoilers for Dark Fate, you would have seen this movie, and you will realize that yeah, Linda Hamilton really is that missing piece from the last previous films. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's Arnold, but it's such a great addition, or such a like bringing her back. It's really like I said, the missing piece of the puzzle, and
Y-
missing piece of why those things didn't work.
Yeah, I think
So
that's totally the case because, Cameron's back, which is awesome, but Sarah Connor herself was such a big part of the first two movies, and I think that I like T3 as well. I think it gets a bad rep because of some of the humor, but that ending at the time was just a jaw dropper, and the effects in it at the time also were amazing. And but ever since then, we've really lacked that really strong kick butt person that Sarah Connor is, and getting
yeah,
Linda Hamilton back feels like that missing piece. It's awesome to have everybody sort of back in some capacity before stuff starts to kick off. And I just love seeing that Sarah Connor, like even though she's however old Linda Hamilton is, can still hold her own and
yeah.
take out Terminators when she needs to.
I think also is that she brought this ferocity to her. Like she had a
Yeah.
fury in her, which is what like Sarah Connor has from T2. That's the one thing I really loved about Linda's performance
Yeah.
in that she was so ferocious, and she continues that even with this film. Like the first time you see her and everything, she's really that almost like an uncaged animal.
Oh
And
yeah.
Linda brought that really almost like a machismo to this role
Big
and
time.
to the film.
Yeah.
And it's one of the biggest highlights of Dark Fate. If one thing to see is like to see Linda Hamilton back. That's a big plus.
I think that's the thing that a lot of people, even if they're mixed on this movie, are going to be happy that Linda Hamilton is back in the fold, and where it sets up where she can be in more movies if this does well enough to justify more movies.
Yeah, that's an if.
That is a big if because
Yeah.
Genesis, as much as I wasn't a fan of it overall, partly because Jai Courtney and partly because what they did with John Connor, but I thought the ideas of different timelines was intriguing. But now that we were at a reset, but Genesis only did 90 million, so like that was a huge disappointment. But we got this one. Now, if this one only does 90 million, I don't know that they're going to take another shot at it, right? We
Yeah,
Worldwide
yeah,
has to deliver more money and turn a bit of a profit to get another go at it. But I think this one, if people are open to it, they're going to be at least pleasantly surprised that it feels like a Terminator movie because as we talked about after the screening, this is kind of like what this is to T2, and Terminator is like what Force Awakens was to A New Hope.
yes, yes,
It's a requel. It's a sequel, but also kind of like a reboot and a remake at the same time,
hmm
where they take very familiar story elements from the other movies, give it a fresh coat of paint, but they also include your old favorites so that it still feels like a sequel and not just a straight reboot. But it is that kind of like duality thing going on that they also did with Jurassic World, where that was basically, you know, Jurassic Park again, but slightly new coat of paint. And for the most part, it works. I think the main thing that is going to divide audiences is the first 5 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
And even, you know, on paper, when you hear about it, and from the trailers, I was like, where's John? And then at Comic-Con, James Cameron was like, Edward Furlong is in the movie. And I was like, we haven't seen a single frame of him. There's no way. And me and Mercy reviewed the trailer, and I said, what if John Connor is dead? And then
you guys you talked about that?
We did. And I said, wouldn't that be a swerve? And then, of course, the opening of this movie, we see John Connor get murdered
This opening's pretty cool.
By a T-800.
They used the CGI to de-age Linda Hamilton, and this is the best CGI in the entire film. It is spectacular. Not only Linda Hamilton, but also Edward Furlong.
Oh yeah,
and even Arnold. Like they even added like a 5 o'clock shadow to Arnold.
Yeah,
too,
Arnold looked good.
Yeah, and it's like, but that's the biggest thing is that what happens is that it's it's like a year after they blew up Cyberdyne.
Yeah,
and they're in Guatemala in a resort, like enjoying life, like. And then suddenly you see Arnold's T-800 appear. And it's like, whoa. And you see John Connor, like Edward Furlong, young John Connor. He turns around. And then bang, 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 like terminated.
Right.
Mission complete. Yeah. It's like, and I remember like watching this. I thought, oh my gosh, like these guys really went for it. Right?
And this is all before the credits have even finished.
Yeah.
Like, it's nuts.
Like, and what you said is true, is that your enjoyment of this film and going forward is if you are up with this entire scene, because this completely changed the entire franchise. It as Matthew said, it's a complete reboot, and it's a complete shift, a radical shift. It's a risk.
Yeah.
And we have to see like if the gamble pays off. Like, and to be honest, it's after Genesis. I think this is kind of like, as I told you, like after the screen, this is kind of like what the series needed.
Right.
Like it needed something to where it's like a huge change, but is it too late? That's the big thing, right?
Yeah, you needed something that was going to shake this franchise up and make it feel relevant again, and making John Connor not the savior of humanity, and the fact that he just gets murdered in the first 5 minutes is kind of that like shedding of all of the baggage of the other movies and saying like, we're going forward, we're going to be something that you guys aren't ready for, and it's going to be something completely different. Now there are going to be a lot of people who scream 2019 PC politics, now the savior of humanity is a woman. It is Danny who we encounter, and
a Mexican too. Oh my
and
gosh!
You know what? I thought it was cool that we finally went, you know, south of the border, and I liked that they shifted the landscape of where most of the movie took place. That was really interesting, and I don't mind that they have made, you know, she is now the person who helps fight back against the machines and help this uprising, because somebody had to do it if it wasn't John, and I like that she starts off as like a meek character. And by the end of the movie, we can sort of see the shades of where that might come from. Yeah. But I still feel like there's a couple more movies to fill in her becoming that hero that she's meant to be.
Yeah, because they tried to, what the film, like, as everyone is watching this has probably seen it.
And if you haven't, there is many spoiler warnings before the start of this video, so they hopefully have, or they don't care.
Like not to begrudge anybody for their acting or performance or whatever, because I myself am as an actor too.
Yeah.
But out of all the performances, like if you were to have a weak link, it's probably the actress playing Dani Ramos. Is that they try to like rocket her into this like savior Sarah Connor position, whereas if you look at Terminator 1, like it was gradual,
right? Like
really. Only at the very end when Linda says, "Oh, get on your feet, soldier," and she starts dragging Kyle Reese, and only then like you see like this future leader, right? Mm. But here, like they kind of like went from 0 to 100, pretty much.
And You're
Yeah,
right.
it doesn't. It was not a gradual like shift towards it. Whereas like they want to establish, okay, this is cemented as the leader. Whereas like maybe in the next film you'll probably see that.
Yeah, and that was one of the only weak acting things, because I thought, obviously Linda Hamilton was awesome. I actually really liked Gabriel Luna as the Rev 9, because it wasn't like as sinister a performance as like a Robert Patrick, but like he was still intimidating, but yet when he has to have those moments of human interaction, like you buy it. And so
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I thought he was good, and then Mackenzie Davis is freaking insane.
Yeah.
And I love her.
Yeah, like she holds it wrong. Like I was fine. I was watching a review like on about Dark Fate as well, like just to hear their thoughts. And the great point was brought up in that Mackenzie Davis was kick ass, but also retained her femininity.
Right.
In that she was still feminine. Whereas you see some movies they try to make some films that want to like have a strong female character almost go too overboard, right?
Right. They
Whereas
basically
she was still feminine. She
yeah.
was like she's a woman who kicks ass, and she does really hold her own. Like she does hold up against, like stands her ground against Linda Hamilton, who's on this on this another level. Well, as he should be as Sarah Connor. But
right.
but it's funny like how you mentioned about the Force Awakens. There's also like Last Jedi in that. If you notice, like at the very last shot of Last Jedi, like all the characters there take over the roles we're familiar with. Like
right.
Poe is Han Solo, Rey is Luke, and Finn, I guess he's probably Leia, right? But these are roles, right?
Yeah, it's like a passing of the torch kind of deal.
Yeah, so it's different characters or different names, but they're the same position and same role. That's what's going on in this film,
right?
In that is that Mackenzie Davis is Kyle Reese, Danny is Sarah Connor.
Yep.
/ John Connor.
Yeah, John Connor in T2.
Yeah, and the Rev 9 is the new name for the Terminator model.
Yeah.
Right? And also Skynet is now called Legion.
Which I know that they wanted to like do something, but Legion is like such a term that is used so often in sci-fi that when they said it, I was like, really? Like I know that they just think maybe Skynet sounds too familiar now, that it wouldn't sound threatening, so they wanted to change it to something more ominous like Legion. But there's so many comic books, sci-fi TV shows, whatever, that use Legion that was like a thing where I was like, James Cameron, come on, give me something else, come up with another cool name. But I do want to mention that as similar to the other movies, there is a few things that they try and like put a twist on it, which of course with the Rev 9 being very T-1000 like, where he can make these blades, and that awesome shot that's in all the trailers and is one of the most violent shots of the movie, where he's going through all those immigration guys and he's basically Baraka-ing from Mortal Kombat, all of them, is awesome. But I thought it was so cool that the liquid metal part of him, which in this is maybe not metal, it's just black goo, can separate from the endoskeleton, so there can be two of him in one place, which was really cool, and they used a pretty good effect, I thought. And it makes it so that it feels a little bit more imposing that this can be a villain who we have two bad guys in one, without having to overcrowd with having another Terminator that we have to follow as well.
It reminded me, so especially there's a scene set in the future, like of a battle.
Oh yeah.
And you see the Rev 9's like really like unleashed, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like it kind of reminded me of like the way his moves were. It kind of reminded me of Venom.
He did big time,
right? Especially because he has these tentacles and everything, and his arms like turn into like Venom / Carnage.
Yeah.
So imagine this Rev 9 is more like a symbiote Terminator.
Yeah.
In a way, because of his moveset, and also switching from the actual endoskeleton into the other form and combining into both of them. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. I was really impressed by that.
And of course, if you're going to see a Terminator movie, I think one of the main things you want is good action. Yeah. Which this has. I'm still mixed on it, because there is some amazing action sequences that are huge, and there is a lot of practical work, but there is a heavy reliance, even on, I love the action scene where they're on the plane and they drop out and all that stuff. It's so CGI heavy. And Tim Miller, the director who did Deadpool and comes from a special effects background, knows how to incorporate the special effects, both practical and CGI, to make a lot of it feel believable. But I felt that, and it's probably a budgetary thing, where there are some shots in this movie that the CGI looks a step above like TV grade effects and not quite the revolutionary level that we're used to with some of the Terminator stuff, where I kept like being pulled out of it. But that whole airplane sequence was sort of like the more original moments in it, because there is, the truck chase and stuff. As the director said, there are certain Terminator cliches and fan service that fans want, and the big car chase smashing things is the one that they want and they're going to get in everyone. And I like that, but some of the CGI action scenes a few times where like the Rev 9 and Mackenzie Davis are throwing each other around and you don't feel the gravity of it like you do in other things. But that whole airplane into the water to the dam is a pretty spectacular ending, and they really crank the action up to 11.
That's one thing. What I liked about T3 is that the action scenes are still hold up, especially the long chase scene throughout LA.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible.
And also when the TX and the T800 fight each other, you feel that.
Oh man, that fight in the bathroom or whatever is still so good.
Right, like, so there is a lot of good things from T3, and it's funny. Like Tim Miller kept on saying, "Oh, we're only stuck with T1 and T2, and we're forgetting about those three." But there's a lot of stuff from like Genesis, Salvation, and Rise of the Machines. The main thing is that what they established, taken from Rise of the Machines, is that Judgment Day still happens.
Right.
And it goes back to my understanding of how time travel works with this franchise, and that I think James Cameron said it in an interview, in that time travel or time in this series in particular is that it's like Back to the Future, where it's all one stream. It just goes back and forth.
Yeah.
It doesn't branch off or anything like that.
Yeah.
So if you were to think about it, like I was thinking about it, and the reason is that why things are different, which really, like, nobody asked Tim Miller like after the Q&A like about the time travel question,
right?
Because he did say he has some theories and he has his own ideas.
Yeah.
But from my understanding is that with T1, Kyle Reese was supposed to go back in time so that he and Sarah Connor.
He fathers John.
Yeah, he fathers John. Then with T2 is that the main objective is to protect John. Blowing up Cyberdyne was like a side thing.
Right.
That's completely out of the whole scenario. So that kind of changed everything.
Yeah.
So if you look at it as a stream, right? A stream of water, is that if something were to go into the middle of that stream and block it, eventually over time, like, water will break through.
Right.
And things will course correct itself.
Yeah.
And that's how you got to look at this thing, is that, okay, things are different, but the events of what is supposed to happen still occur. Yes, Judgment Day happens, and an AI turns itself on humanity, sends the nukes.
Yeah.
It may be called, and there's a Messiah figure that comes and unites all of humanity to fight against the machines.
Yeah.
So these events do happen. It may be called different, might be named different, or might look differently and stuff like that, but these things are supposed to happen.
Yeah, the endoskeleton of the events is the same.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. It's like now, which is also interesting about like Sarah Connor's character, even Arnold's character in this, because they're now like Bishop from X-Men. They're from a time where that really does not happen after this movie.
Yeah.
So they're stuck.
They are stuck. Yeah. And I did like that when we first meet up with Arnold in this movie, we find out that he has been sending Sarah Connor the coordinates of any sort of time anomalies so she can kill the Terminators before they actually even get a chance to get their bearings and do their mission, which was really interesting. And then, of course, we find out that after he killed John Connor and had nothing to do and no way to go back to the future because
Yeah,
the future didn't exist anymore, this T-800, Carl just hung out for 20 odd years living a normal life. And I do you think the name Carl is a shout out to Carl Weathers, good buddy of
oh yeah, well,
of Arnold from Predator?
I didn't realize that until
Right, like I just wonder, was that in somebody's mind when they came up with it? But I think it's hilarious that he's just been selling curtains and hanging out.
That's hilarious.
And Tim Miller said, in this, Arnold is an adoptive father of. He's got his girlfriend and her son, and he said that James Cameron really wanted him to maybe include that Terminators can father children, and he was like, "That's a bridge too far. We aren't going to cross it." And I think that was probably right. But it is interesting to see Arnold in a Terminator movie where his number one mission is not to kill or protect. It's actually atoning for something that he did that he now realizes was maybe, it was still his mission, but now that he's had time to become more human, he understands what it is he took from Sarah, and everything he does in this movie is to make up for that action.
Yeah, and that goes back to it goes back to a scene in T2.
Yeah,
where he's explaining everything, and he says that
the chip.
His chip is a learning computer, right? So now, like, it brings about there's always this question, like, okay, what if a Terminator's been sent back in time, and they complete their mission? What do they do?
Yeah.
Right. And these are infiltration units, so it's a learning CPU, and it's got to learn everything. So now with Arnold is like, okay, he's learned about humanity and forgiveness and everything like that, only to an extent, because an AI cannot really learn about love and go that far, right? There's a barrier because it's not doesn't compute to zeros and ones. So, but he has learned enough about why it's all these like heavy sci-fi ideas about AI, right?
Yeah. It's like he can empathize without actually feeling anything.
Yeah.
Right?
And it goes like, I now know why you cry, and learning like why do people cry and everything from all the heavy work, the drama work from T2.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept, especially with Arnold. Like it's a cool idea. It's like, okay, what do these robots do now that they completed the mission?
Mm-hmm.
And also Tim Miller did say that maybe Skynet sent a bunch of T-800s in different parts. Different time periods.
And just because that T-800 finished the mission, they had nothing to do, and they're just out there, which of course opens the door for Arnold to be in the next one in some capacity, because there's going to be another one that they had sent back before that we didn't see yet, because he does go out in this, and it is nice to see that even though he was an outdated model, he still got to hold his own quite a bit in some of the final scenes, which was cool. And Tim Miller at our screening also spoke at length about some of those fan service Terminator cliche moments and how he didn't want to give the thumbs up because he said he was much older when he saw T2, so he didn't think it was necessarily a cool thing. I was 11 when I saw T2, so I freaking love that. And one of the moments that kind of irked me, to be honest, was that moment where Arnold picks up the sunglasses and looks at them and then puts them down. And I was like, you know what? At least have him, if you're going to tease the audience like that, have him throw them on, look at himself, and then decide, nah, this ain't right. But to just tease us, like, is he going to do it? And then he doesn't. And I was like, they should have just cut that, because it actually just made me kind of angry. I was like, why put that in there? That was just in there to mess with us. But the other thing that is fan service, but they had to do, was, Tom Hulkenberg's score is awesome. I love Junkie XL's music, and he's great. But they had to work some of the Brad Fiedel in, and they do at some key moments where, all of a sudden, dun 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 dun, and you're like, yes, the new score is good, but as soon as they start hitting those notes, I get the nostalgia and the feels, and it just makes the action more powerful.
Well, it's iconic, right? Like the Terminator theme is so, you got to have it in there. Like it's right up there with the Jurassic Park theme.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's so like once you hear it, like yes, I know what this is,
Right? Yeah,
right?
yeah, hands down.
That's what I think. I don't know about everyone else.
Oh yeah. No, it is one of those things, and literally, there's only a handful of scores where all you have to hear is like a second and a half, and that's one of them. That like you hear a second and a half, you're like, oh yeah, Terminator, it's on.
But I did like how Junkie like infused like his style to the Terminator team
Yeah,
theme. Sorry, it's
yeah, it
because
was.
he has the heavy drums. He has like a very Hans Zimmer sound. Like, how does this
Yeah,
work with like Terminator? And it's pretty neat. That's some of the iconic moments in this film, or
yeah,
like they're trying to replicate those moments.
right.
Which is why like eventually what this film becomes is like they just, if you really break it down, they just kind of remade T1 and T2.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
essentially.
it's like I said, it's like those modern movies where they take the greatest hits and they just
Yeah.
spin it a little bit and give it to you again. But I think because we have had these other Terminator movies that didn't feel as much like T1 and T2, just to be kind of in that same vein is what's going to hit people and make them really enjoy it. Now, some of the negatives of this are that it is very familiar, and even when they reveal that Danny is John, it's more of a revelation to Sarah than it is to us, because I never thought that she was going to be the mother of the savior, because it just seems so obvious that why would they do that again, right? And then having Grace have this weird ticking clock of she needs these meds every once in a while, or she passes out and becomes incapacitated, kind of seemed just like a convenient way to not have her kicking ass the whole movie, but like didn't quite work for me, only because she says in a line of dialogue that the reason is because when they juice her up or whatever and send her back, they think that she's going to end up succeeding in the first like hour, otherwise you don't actually stand a chance against a Rev 9. So that's why she needs these drugs, because they didn't think she would be back that long.
But she overheats, right? Because she's
Yeah,
augmented,
right.
And I think the body overheats, so she needs all
Yeah,
these like
they
infusions, like
they
to
give
cool
us
her down.
they
Right?
give us some explanation, but I just like I didn't think that it added much to the story other than sidelining that character at moments when we wish that she was able to spring into action, and it just felt a little bit like them intentionally spinning their wheels so that later we need to incorporate
Yeah.
some other elements to be a little bit more prominent, which is fine, but that's kind of like if I'm picking a negative part, that whole thread just felt a little off to me.
And I'll say like a one main negative for me is that um this is like on a technical issue, is that when you look at Jim's, okay, if this is like going back to Jim's movies,
Yeah.
If you notice, like T1 and T2 has a specific style to it, right? Like
Yeah.
it has like, especially it's to me, I would say like iconic blue, like
Oh, yeah.
steelish blue style,
Yeah.
like look to it.
Right.
And this one, like it looks really bland. I can be honest, like it doesn't. There's nothing that separates this from like another blockbuster movie except for the content.
Right.
But when you look at it, it's sort of like a bland film. Like
Yeah, especially color wise, because so much of it takes
Yeah.
place in like desert sort of areas and stuff, but it all is a little notch desaturated,
Yeah.
and it does, none of it really pops. You're right, it feels kind of flat. Which we saw it at TIFF, which is one of the best theaters in terms of projection and sound, like in the world. So I don't think that movie can look much better than when we saw it. So yeah, it doesn't. Cameron, he always liked to sort of infuse some sort of color scheme to help mirror kind of what he was doing. And there were
Yeah.
a lot of blues, and there's a bunch of different versions of T2 where like sometimes they've cranked it up a little bit too much, like in the 3D where like so much of it is almost all blue. But yeah, it didn't look as dynamic as the Cameron movies. And while I do like the way that Miller shoots action, because it's not all MTV quick cutting where you can't tell what's happening, it still doesn't feel like the way Cameron shot action in the 90s.
Yeah.
It very much feels like a modern 2019 movie using the 2019 tools, which is fine. You can only take nostalgia so far back without maybe raising the cost. Nowadays, I think to do, to shoot on film and to do all this other stuff, the cost just starts to pile up and up and up.
But even still, like if you look at some of these, like some of all of these like modern blockbusters, like there's really, it's got like a murky look to it, right? There's nothing that really sets itself apart from anything else. Like if you take this into another, that's why like I think Joker stands out the most, because like there's a lot of, it has a unique look to it, a unique style. Like whereas if you take Dark Fate, then I don't know, something like say Ant-Man and the Wasp or something like that.
Yeah, or like Dark Fate and Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah,
right?
It's like it all looks the same.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. That's why when a movie like Joker looks so visually striking, or the other movie this year that felt like a throwback was Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Where like all the colors in that movie pop like crazy. Like it looks like a movie so colorful that in the last 5 years, nobody's dared to crank the color up as much as that movie did. Because for some reason we think, oh, if it's too colory, the audience is going to feel like they're watching a cartoon instead of a drama for adults. But that's not necessarily true.
No.
And yeah, this is a dystopian movie, but to have the visuals in our present day match that was a little bit drab. I did like when we go to the future. I liked the way that the future looked in all of those scenes compared to, say, a Terminator Salvation. This is a little bit more modern, but to me, like, I didn't mind that it felt like a video game, because that stuff, it justified it with its venomness, like you said, of the Rev 9 and stuff.
The future scenes look really good. Especially that there's this one big action sequence that look really. I hope that they jump straight to the future with that. Just go straight into that. Like no more going. Okay, we're done with the past and everything.
Yeah, because that stuff looked really cool, and I the way Tim Miller was talking, it didn't sound to me like he necessarily was going to direct the next one, even if there is another one.
That's another thing too. There's one interesting thing I noticed, like when Tim Miller was talking, like he says like he just passes it off. It's like it's like I'll like I hope this movie does well and everything. If not, we made a good thing. I hope it's like what? Like hold on a second, right?
And
like,
now it stems from his experience with Deadpool, where Ryan Reynolds got him fired off at Deadpool 2 because they had such different visions. So maybe in his mind he's just trying not to get attached to this baby as much, but in all of his wording, it really sounded like he has set the table, but he's not going to stay for dinner.
I mean? It's something like that. Yeah.
So I don't know, but if he does return, I do think that I like what he did with the future, and I would be interested to see more of that. But we'll see. It'll depend if audiences embrace this or not, and it'll be a shame if they just dismiss it because they didn't necessarily like the last two. Because I do think this is more of what the audiences were hoping for in a Terminator movie. Now, the people who feel that it's too familiar are not wrong. It's a valid criticism, but I would rather have a little bit of over-familiarity with the James Cameron storyline than totally alien and not my cup of tea. And one other thing, they did mention in the Q&A that it is very interesting to note that the opening of this movie completely pulls an Alien 3. Yeah. And Cameron is the guy who did this one, where you're just like, oh my gosh, he just the first 5 minutes undoes everything that his great last movie did. And that's always been one of those things that, anybody who hates Alien 3, and even if you love Alien 3, I think almost everybody is upset that Hicks and Newt are just dead right off the bat.
Yeah.
And the fact that
who better to do it, right?
Right. Who better to finally say, like, I'm the guy who pulls the trigger. So Cameron got to finally do one of those.
But is it too late? That's the thing. That's what I said in the beginning. Is like they did. Is it too late? Because to me, this should have been Genesis. To be honest.
Yep.
Like this should have been it. But I don't know. I hope that people do go see it. And I hope that it does get something where Paramount can make another one.
Right. And the only nice thing about now is that even if it actually doesn't do good at the theater, if a streaming service pays enough money for it and it gets enough views, then you might get a content creator like that who's willing to foot the bill for a movie down the road. But it is one of those sad things where every once in a while, there's so many franchises that go on too long and they never have another great movie. And then there are those few like this where they finally have a one that works, but you're wondering, is it too late? Have they done too much damage to the brand in the meantime before they finally figured out what it was we all wanted?
Like, exactly. Like, to me, like, and I also have a buddy of mine who, like, I totally agree with what he says, is that they should have stuck with Salvation and concluded this series in the future. This series should have been done.
Right.
If I can be honest, like, it should have been done. We should have had a movie with the big future war.
Yeah.
And that would be it.
Yeah.
Done with Terminator. But the thing is, like, everyone wants to, all these stories are like trying to go to the past and go, like, no, the way to end this is in the future, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, they hopefully can do one more and give us the big future war and find out how humanity, either survives or doesn't in the face of Legion, and put a bow on it and just think, instead of setting up a new trilogy, just give us one more and wrap it up.
To be honest, it's
everything doesn't have to be a trilogy. You know what I mean? And that's how, like, every new movie that comes out is the first of a trilogy, and it's like, why?
Exactly. Like take for instance Happy Death Day, right?
Yeah.
One Happy Death Day to you. Like, that's it. There shouldn't be any more.
Right.
Because that's perfect. Because that was like T1 and T2.
Yeah.
This story has been told.
Yeah.
Right, and that should have been it. Yeah, there's a getaway. They found a way with T3. Will, like, establish that no Judgment Day happens.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're gonna do that, then with this, end it in the future, because that's the only possible solution.
Yeah, I think that we'll have to see how it does, man.
Yeah,
anybody watching this video, hit the comments and let us know what you think they should do for the next one. If you're still hungry for more Terminator after this, or is this one good enough that you're, like, willing to just call it a day after this one? Hit the comments and let us know, because I'm interested to see what the general public thinks of this thing.
Mm-hmm. And,
yeah, so thanks for joining me, Steve. It was awesome to have you on here for a spoiler chat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we gotta talk more spoilers, man. Like, for what? Like with our Mad Max one. Remember? Were you?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Yeah, like how the feral boy is actually
the feral kid. Yeah, if you've never heard that theory, check out the Armchair Director's commentary of Mad Max Fury Road, which Steve Kasan is also on, and we chat about the feral kid conspiracy on there too.
It's fact, man. It's fact.
I think you might be onto something with that one. Well, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always, never feed your mogwai after midnight.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Yeah, can you believe it? They didn't give him any hasta la vista, and they made him say, "I won't be back."
I know.
What?
Oh my gosh, what nonsense! Like, Tim, like, God bless you, but come on, man, you're no James Cameron.
Yeah, there's certain fan service moments that I'm like, you gotta hit them even if you don't want to.